Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. That's Kane. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Bruce Saitsu, Vice President of Advocacy. I'd like to welcome you on behalf of the Los Angeles section of the National Council of Jewish Women. We are a grassroots organization of 500 volunteers who, together with a professional staff, carry on a century-old mission of providing needed social services and presenting important advocacy programs. These activities are designed to improve the quality of life for women, children, and families in our community. Today is the 42nd anniversary of an epic legal victory for women, Roe versus Wade. Tonight, we celebrate the U.S. Supreme Court 7-2 decision, which affirms the constitutional right of women to make their own reproductive choice. Since 1973, thank you. However, legislators have been gradually chipping away at those rights. This evening, our program focus will be on the current necessity for political action to preserve the rights. And if you didn't go on your web, you'll see a long message from the National Council about action. And I know Maya will tell you about that, to Congress. I'd like to thank the many co-sponsors of tonight's program for their support. I'd also like to thank Ruth Williams, our Director of Advocacy. Anyone that can answer 240 yes applications to come to a meeting deserves a special mention, and for her hard work. It is my privilege to introduce tonight's Master of Ceremonies, Rosalind Helfand. I have all of her bio, but I'll make it short. She's a graduate of UC Santa Cruz, where she has been deeply involved in student affairs and been honored with the Student of the Year award in her senior year. After an early career in local politics and social activism, she became a successful management consultant to nonprofit corporations and governmental entities. She specializes in the creation and direction of innovative programs that address local, political, and cultural issues. Rosalind's a tireless program organizer, innovator, and has created a unique celebration for us this evening. She has engaged virtually every local organization that's dedicated to supporting Roe versus Wade, and with the assistance of Marilyn Satsmary, has enlisted 5 prominent and remarkable luminaries who will read us stories from the front line. It's been inspiring for me to witness the involvement and the commitment by the younger generations of women who are carrying on this struggle for those of us who started so many years ago. Before I ask her to come to the mic, I'd like to remind you of 2 remarkable events we're going to have here at the Council. One, February 18th, that will deal with Black history, voters' rights, with freedom riders. I'm very excited about that, and I hope you all come. And then again, we have our annual Jewish Women's Conference, and that's March the 1st, and it addresses all the needs of women of all ages. Maybe it stops at mine, I'm not sure. But in any event, before I ask Roz to come, would you just raise your hand if you belong to one of these very 9 wonderful organizations? I'd like to just wave back to you and say thank you for your commitment. We'll just leave it to all 3.
for that. I don't know where my bio came from. Somebody pulled it and Wikipedia. I'm not on Wikipedia.
You are
now. So, first of all, don't be careful when you try and clap and hold your cell phone at the same time. It can be a real disaster. But on that note, don't forget to either silence or turn off your cell phones.
Thank you.
And do not text and listen to speakers. So, thanks everybody. So, before I do my own welcome for everybody, I want to introduce a really amazing person here at CJW to just say a few words to us before our program. Ruth Williams is the Director of Advocacy here at the National Council of Jewish Women Los Angeles. The National Council of Jewish Women in Los Angeles. She is an extraordinary human being. She is a long-time leader of advocacy, and she has really taken the lead on making things like this happen tonight. And Ruth, you do such extraordinary work. Everyone, take a moment to give a round of applause for Ruth.
Thank you, Roz, very much. But the truth is that we can't do the work unless we have people like you with us to support us. Otherwise, these things wouldn't happen. Roe wouldn't happen, civil rights wouldn't happen, and so forth. So I thank all of you for being there, coming out tonight, and supporting us. I'll just take a quick moment and probably duplicate a little of what Ditto said. We call each other Ditto. I just want to offer my heartfelt appreciation to all of you. You're all to the incredibly talented celebrities that have taken time out of their schedules to be here tonight. They're here to read. It's been a long day. Experiences of the girls and women whose lives have been changed because of choice. And people like Joy Shore, who's the founder of RAP, and at one point was even listed on what they called the Nuremberg hit list. And her life was really in danger. And the fight's only going to get worse, you guys. And knowing it, we have to all work together to win, because we know what could possibly happen in the coming years with our legislators. But I have to take a few minutes to thank some individuals who put their heart and soul into making tonight a success. Marilyn Zaberi, who is our coordinator. Without her passion, we wouldn't have had the distinct honor of the celebrities being here tonight. I acknowledge Joy Shore, who's an amazing woman and a very long-time dear friend of mine. She has helped thousands of girls. Those letters that you see in the lobby are RAP, Women's Reproductive Rights Assistance Project. And I suggested get in touch with her. She needs help. She needs volunteers. The calls are coming in. Yvonne Winchell, who has gone above and beyond, giving her time to be here daily, working on this project. These people are volunteers, and they're putting hours and their own money into tonight. The rest of the Roe Committee, Donna Benjamin, Raina Martinez, Susan Pincus, Tina Moore, the Women's Advisory Board, the City of West Hollywood, Ruth Zaitsu, the City of West Hollywood, who worked side by side with us. They've done the amazing posters that you see in the lobby. And all of our co-sponsors that are listed on the program. Our wonderful staff that you see in the lobby, Joni and Crystal, who never said no to anything. And trust me, at times we had to say no to another amazing woman. And that amazing woman is Roz Helfand, who never takes any credit. She's a dynamo. She's a woman who knows absolutely no boundaries, trust me. And she gave more than 100%. And I'm proud to know her. I'm proud to know you all. And forgive me if I left anybody out, but you all mean so much. And at times, things got a little stressful with what we could do and couldn't do. And I tell you, this is an incredible lady. Yeah. She has put 24/7 into making this a success tonight. So, Roz, thank you. Yeah.
Okay, so what that means is I have to bring it as an MC. So, I don't want to disappoint y'all. All right, so I just want to, before we introduce our first speaker, I want to riff on what both Ruth Sykes and Ruth Williams have said. This is a collaboration of 13 organizations from across Los Angeles, and we even have Lindsay Scheibel from Fund Texas Choice who flew in to join us tonight. So we said we want to do something where this is not just a bunch of logos on a page and maybe people send something to their mailing list. We want to do something where every organization has the opportunity to participate on our planning committee, to contribute resources, to really contribute meaningfully to tonight. And that's what happened. And so you can look on your program, you see the list of organizations that have joined us. And it's pretty incredible. So before we begin, just one more round of applause for all the organizations we have here. Now I want to introduce to you, we have two speakers before our celebrity readers for this evening. The first one is an incredible woman who's going to give us a legislative update. She's going to give a state of the state. She's going to tell us what's going on around the country right now. I know you've seen it. I know you've read the headlines, but you're going to get a little bit of an expert overview. Her name is Sandra Fluke. Is a social justice attorney who has devoted her career to public interest advocacy, from economic justice to gay rights to environmental progress. She is nationally regarded for her expertise in gender equality and reproductive justice. In 2014, she ran for the state senate, and I hope she's going to run again. Everybody, please join me in welcoming Sandra Fluke up to the stage.
Thank you, everyone, for that warm welcome. And I just want to say that I did not put in the plug about running again. That was not on my behalf. But thank you for the warm welcome. It's always nice to have the hometown crowd. You know, as she said, I've been asked to give a bit of a State of the Union on reproductive rights, where we are on legislation on reproductive rights in this country. And I wish that, like President Obama, I could tell you that our union is strong. And I wish that I could give you all the opportunity to rise and clap after every sentence during my State of the Union, because I can tell you're that kind of crowd. But unfortunately, that's not what I can say to you this evening. Unfortunately, what I need to say to you is that reproductive rights and freedom and justice in this country are under attack more than perhaps at any other time since Roe v. Wade was decided 42 years ago. Unfortunately, what I have for you is a list of the ways in which our rights are under attack. And it's a list that many of you are familiar with, things like waiting periods, restrictions on how many weeks into a pregnancy a woman can access an abortion, restrictions on whether doctors can perform them or not, whether or not they have admitting privileges at the local hospital, which of course they're denied if they actually try to perform abortions. Restrictions on being able to use medical abortion and being able to work with a patient over the phone. Requirements of informed consent, where informed consent requires doctors to lie to women about phony associations with breast cancer and long-term mental health consequences that don't actually exist. You're familiar with many of these attacks, all too familiar. So what I thought I would focus on tonight is two particular trends that I find to be some of the most disturbing that we're seeing. One is the realization of what many of us have long talked about and long realized, which is that the attack on access to abortion and abortion rights is an attack on a woman's fundamental right to control her body. And if you think about that for even just a moment, you realize that that applies to pregnant women who want to be pregnant as well. That this applies to all of us and our ability to control our own bodies and to be able to be free from prosecution. So what I'd like to tell you about first this evening is that we're seeing a pattern of women being detained and arrested while pregnant. Some examples. Based on the belief that he had an obligation to give a fetus a chance for life, a judge in Washington, D.C. ordered a critically ill 27-year-old woman who was 26 weeks pregnant to undergo a cesarean section that she did not want, which the judge understood might kill the woman. Neither the woman nor her baby survived the surgery. In Iowa, a pregnant woman who fell down a flight of stairs was reported to the police after seeking help at a local hospital. She was arrested for attempted fetal homicide. In Utah, a woman gave birth to twins. One was stillborn. Healthcare providers believed that the stillbirth could have been the result of the woman's decision to delay having a cesarean. She was arrested on charges of fetal homicide. In Louisiana, a woman who went to the hospital for unexplained vaginal bleeding, a woman who sought help when she had a medical emergency, was locked up for 1 year on charges of second-degree murder before her medical records revealed that she had actually suffered a miscarriage between 11 and 15 weeks of pregnancy. In Florida, a woman who was in active labor was forced to undergo a cesarean section because her doctor mistakenly believed that she was endangering the life of the fetus by choosing to have a vaginal birth. I think these examples show that when we fight for reproductive rights, we fight for women's ability to control their bodies in so many circumstances, and that this is truly about a fundamental right. Now, the other moment that I wanted to highlight for us this evening, and many of us have talked about this for a long time, that to truly have the right to abortion, you have to be able to access that care. You have to be able to afford it. You have to be able to find a doctor, a clinic, to be able to afford to travel there. And this is the area where we're seeing the most attacks legislatively now, is on not outright prohibiting abortion necessarily, but making it more and more difficult to access it and to afford it. So some of you may have heard on the news that today there was a plan in the House of Representatives in Congress to introduce and vote upon H.R. 36, which would have banned all abortions after 20 weeks. And it had some narrow exceptions, but the exception for sexual assault required women to have reported their sexual assault to the police. And as we know, many women don't report sexual assaults to the police. So it was widely reported that there was an incredibly rare thing that happened in Congress, which was that a group of anti-choice women representatives, so women who are decidedly anti-choice, said, no, this is wrong, this sexual assault exemption is problematic, women don't always report to the police, and the bill was pulled. Yes, but how did you know there was a but coming? But, yes, and I don't doubt those women's sincerity, because I would never doubt the sincerity of any elected official. I don't doubt their sincerity. I'm sure they were truly concerned for women who'd been victims of sexual assault. But I also know that they made statements to their fellow elected officials that we can't vote on this bill because the pro-choice advocates keep beating us up in the public spotlight for not sensitively handling rape. So instead, a bill was introduced and passed, which received far less coverage on the news, and which we all need to understand is an example of the coming wave of legislation and just how insidious it is. This bill is affectionately known as H.R. 36, or H.R. 7, or to those of us who don't know the bill as well, the No Taxpayer Funding for Abortion Act and Abortion Insurance Full Disclosure Act. You can just tell it's insidious by the fact that it's long. Now, this piece of legislation does some things that we've seen before. It says that that D.C. can't use its money to fund any insurance program or any services that would allow women to access abortion. It codifies the Hyde Amendment, which you're going to hear more about from Maya at the end of the evening. It's a federal law and rule which says that women who access their insurance through the federal government, so Medicaid or Medicare or other types of insurance programs, cannot access abortion unless certain circumstances. And here's the part where it goes a step further. Because I think many of us for many years have become accustomed to the idea that, yes, for poor women, for women who are more dependent on government services than perhaps the rest of us, there are restrictions on the reproductive rights that they can exercise, on the access that they have. And we've said to ourselves, well, perhaps that's fair. Maybe you shouldn't be able to use someone else's money to pay for abortion if they don't agree with abortion. It's a very easy argument for opponents of abortion to make. But when you're a poor woman who has no other access to abortion, it is absolutely limiting of your reproductive rights. And for those of us who have not felt that this was our fight, because thank goodness we were privileged enough to not have to rely on government-funded programs, this is now absolutely our fight. Because what H.R. 7 also does is limits small businesses or individuals who receive tax credits to afford insurance, which under the Affordable Care Act is almost all of us. We can't use those credits on any insurance that even covers abortion. Whether we're having an abortion or not, we can't even use the credits to buy any insurance plan. And in fact, in many states, the insurance exchanges are prohibited from offering any insurance plan that covers abortion. So this ability to stop us from being able to afford abortion has gone so far that it's wiping out insurance coverage from the market nationwide. Slowly but surely, this is where we're going. So these are the types of more technical attacks, the attack on the ability to afford, to access, that are our coming fight. And I know that each one of you will be standing with me as we fight these types of attacks. And because I suspect that some of us have grown tired of coming to reproductive rights events because they become depressing, I will leave you with what I hope is an uplifting note. When we think about the Supreme Court, we think over and over again about how at risk Roe v. Wade is and how much damage the current Supreme Court could do. And they very well may do that damage. But the next president, very likely, especially if it's a two-term president, will have the opportunity to appoint 4 Supreme Court justices. We have 4 Supreme Court justices who are moving into their early 80s, when they traditionally retire. 2 of those Supreme Court justices are anti-choice justices.
Right.
If we elect a strongly pro-choice president and a pro-choice Senate, we have the possibility of 6 pro-choice seats on the Supreme Court. We have the possibility of protecting Roe for generations. And now we need to do the work to make sure that becomes a reality. Thank you.
Before we invite the next speaker up, raise your hand if there's an empty seat next to you. I think someone can sit in a couple of these up here. I think we have a few people at the back. Do you guys want to sit down? Thanks. Yes? No? All right, there are some seats around, so feel free. Okay, before we begin our stories, we want to set the stage. We want to go back to the pre-Roe era. We want to talk about how we connect the past and the present and where we're going into the future. And so in order to connect our past and our present, to really celebrate and honor Roe v. Wade and the anniversary that we are here for tonight, we wanted to invite an incredible woman. In 1991, Joyce Shore brought to NCJWLA the idea of a fund for poor women who are unable to pay for a safe and legal abortion. Thus, the Women's Reproductive Rights Assistance Project was conceived. Yeah. Now, in its 23rd year, RAP remains a 100% volunteer organization and a national safety net for low-income women and teens faced with ever-growing costs for the procedure and a mountain of restrictions. Joyce has won many awards for her work. She is phenomenal, and she helped plan tonight's event. So everyone, please join me in welcoming Joyce Shore.
I already started. So funny because Ross said, we want somebody to talk about pre-row, and I started feeling very old. I mean, really old, and I said, okay, I'll hobble on up. First of all, I want to thank everybody for showing up. This is a good-looking crowd, and we should be so proud of ourselves. And I want to thank Roz and the committee and NCJW opening up their wonderful space and spearheading this, and all the organizations that also contributed to this. On your sheet, there is a flyer with all of the latest anti-abortion actions, both at the federal and state level. That was printed yesterday. Today, it's obsolete because things have changed. Instead of HR 36, as Sandra just pointed out, we have HR 7, which is still as insidious. And of course, they are thinking, when you and I sleep at night, I'm convinced they're thinking about new laws that they can dream of, especially at the state level. But you know, it's never been this bad. I encourage you to take those flyers home and to show them to people, because trust me, people that you think are informed are not. 33 years ago, I started my advocacy, and things have never been so bleak. 2/3 of the states now are hostile to abortion rights. In addition to that, we had firewall-proof Congress, both in the Senate and in the House, where we could pretty much beat back anti-choice legislation. We no longer have that. We are extremely vulnerable. Each abortion bill that comes down the pike, we have to fight, and it's going to be an uphill battle. Anti-choice laws have closed clinics, especially in Texas. And Lindsay, Scheibel, who's reading one of the stories tonight, started a fund in Texas several months ago, and she's here to help read the stories, but I want to thank her for helping to help women, because we all work collaboratively together. Women are traveling. And so thank you, Lindsay, and thank you for coming. I don't know where you are, but thank you so much. Now Texas, because of these restrictions, went from 40 clinics to 7 clinics. All over the South, Midwest, and deep North states, these same types of laws are targeted towards abortion rights. As a result of that, they're no longer safe. Even with Roe being legal, these states are no longer safe for women. If you add in the 1976 edition of the Hyde Amendment, which basically made it illegal for any funding to go to poor women, women started to really feel the pinch. Currently, there's only 17 states, including California, that fund women's abortion, and get this, we do so under court order. So anything can change. It matters who you vote for. Yes. Now, let me see. How many of you were born before Roe? Oh, a good amount of you. And how many of you are really active in the abortion rights movement? Okay. Well, hopefully after you hear the stories and you hear the speeches, you will leave here with fire in your belly, because we're going to need it. And we're going to have to all band together, and we're going to have to talk about what's going on, and we're going to have to let young people know. Activism is a funny thing. You know, you never really understand why all of a sudden you become active. But it happened to me. I'll tell you my journey. In 1969, I took off and went to college from Palm Beach, Florida to Atlanta, Georgia. That was the big city. I never saw seasons before. It was pretty amazing. My best friend got pregnant. Off she went to Tennessee to get an abortion. She came back that night, and she started to hemorrhage. Well, we could have taken her to the hospital, but what they had was septic wards in those days, where women who had procedures that had complications, they could go to, and the hospitals would take care of them. However, you could be arrested. They forced you to tell you who performed the procedure. So many women opted not to do that. She was lucky. We had another woman that was young woman living in the dorm with us, whose father was a doctor. And he came over that night and basically saved her life. Not so many women wound up like she did. A lot of women became sterile from abortions, a lot of women died. But it was a big game changer for me, and I didn't realize it until fast forward to 1982, and I'm eating at a Carl's Jr. restaurant. They had a salad bar. Carl's and the owner, I saw the women from Now running around, and they're putting pamphlets on the car windows. And I said, what's going on out there? And I went outside, and one of them said, don't eat here. He uses your money against you for anti-abortion causes. Bam! My head exploded. And I remembered it was 1969, and I was back in that dorm, feeling what I was feeling. And I knew then I could never let another woman go what my friend went through. And that was when I started my activism. And in 1989, I was very fortunate. Fran Lyons, who's here today, who was the co-president at the time of NCJW, invited me to come and join their pro-choice satellite. We called it a satellite in those days. And when I came here, right upstairs in the building in 1991, we all sat around and I approached them about this fund for poor women that needed abortions. And of course, they were fabulous. They said yes. And RAP was born, or conceived, as you said. However, we also were one of the original, like the 13 colonies. We went off and started the National Network of Abortion Funds. There was 13 funds. Now, there's over 100 funds, mostly on the local, state level, right? Excellent. RAP is national. We're one of the few. As a matter of fact, we pretty much are the main national fund most of the time. We take hundreds of calls from women. We fund as much as we can give them to get the procedure. But the people that deserve most of our attention are the doctors and the staff at the clinics. The hostility that they go through every day to avoid, even for lack of a better word, getting killed is amazing. And those are the true heroes in this fight. I'm going to tell you who we helped in 2014. We committed, and by the way, most women, they need maybe $100 or $200, some need more, but we committed $214,000 to 1,255 women, with the average grant being $171. 179, yes, thank you. 179 of the women were under age 18, and 10 years old was our youngest. 52% of the pregnancies resulted from no birth control. Now, we were hoping that the ACA would change that, but with what's going on with the Hobby Lobby decision and allowing this Religious Freedom Act to interfere with people's rights to birth control, because we're talking birth control now, this might not be as helpful as we thought it was going to be. And they are fighting actively, and they are now giving other, not organizations, but companies, the same right, even if they're not a religious affiliation, to opt out of birth control. Again, as Sandra pointed out, when you have abortion care as part of your insurance for all these years, they also had birth control, and now they don't have anything. And if they succeed in cutting this particular part of the Affordable Care Act out, we are going to have so many unbelievable, unwanted pregnancies, which is completely what we do not want to have. And also, 91 had fetal anomalies, so were not capable with life. 69 of the women had already one or more children. 69%, I'm sorry. That's a much higher number, 69%. 229 women were victims of domestic violence or abuse. 364 were students. 25 teens had to go through a judicial bypass. Now, if you look on that sheet that's on your chair, there's a bill in Alabama that assigns an attorney to the fetus. So when a young woman goes into a court to get permission because she might live in a home that's abusive and she would be literally hurt, harmed, thrown out to the street, she now goes up against an attorney for the fetus. Also, there was one that chose to do RU46, which is the medical abortion. For some reason, most people, they don't know by the time they're 9 weeks. They find out a little bit later, 10, 11 weeks, that they're pregnant, and that only goes up to 9 weeks. 217 were homeless. 146 were victims of rape or incest. 444 worked part-time in very low-income jobs. 120 worked full-time, again, in low-income jobs. Almost 59% were unemployed. 1,269 received public assistance. 9 were affected with HIV/AIDS. 25 were addicted to drugs or alcohol. And in more than 70% of the cases, the man had abandoned the woman. Now, there's a bill in Missouri that was just introduced that women have to get permission from the man if she wants to have an abortion. It is becoming insane. And the women that we help are the most vulnerable of all. So, yes, that's right. I want to change the dialogue on the entire debate of abortion because we need to start saying, what about the woman? What about the woman? Fetal love is so over the top on our opponents that they have lost the fact that the woman involved in the pregnancy is the woman that would be caring for this particular child. And let's look at this. What kind of life would that child have? Abortion is an economic issue. As a matter of fact, the same representatives who vote against abortion and birth control also have voted to cut food stamps, insurance for children, and Head Start, adding even more economic woes to their families. For the so-called pro-life movement, life stops at birth. In some ways, women are living like before Roe. I mean, they're going on the internet, they're getting they're getting herbs, they're drinking all kinds of potions, they're finding people that will do the abortion for them. And we know about these complications because we see some of these women at the clinics after they've had a complication. Now let's take a small cruise through the country. Let's say you are a woman and you need an abortion. What's it like? Well, the first thing you got to know is, what are the states around you? What is your state and the laws? You got to know if you can find. So there's some places like Mississippi with only one clinic. There are other states that have more, but the distances are great. Again, look at Texas. You find a provider, and you have to also remember there are waiting periods. Some are up to 72 hours. You then have to find arrange travel. You have to arrange a hotel. You have to get childcare if you have children at home, all adding to the costs. Outside the clinic, if you get all that taken care of, there are picketers. They're not sidewalk counselors. They're domestic terrorists is what I call them. That's right. They are there, they're abusive, they're intimidating, and I've even seen violence. And at the same time, states are knocking down the buffer zones that protect these women outside the clinics. And then you get inside the clinic, and what do? They tell you they're forced to read misleading information. Abortion causes breast cancer, mental illness. With later pregnancies, there's all kinds of problems if you have an abortion. All not true. The costs here range from anywhere from $400 to $700 for a first trimester procedure when most abortions are done, and many women know of these costs and sell their belongings or use money from their rent, their utilities, anywhere they can get it. It is an economic issue. When they've exhausted all their options and they go to the clinics will call the local funds and then wrap. There is a war on women, and there is a war on Roe, and unfortunately we're losing right now. I'm asking, in closing, that if you share our passion on the issue and would like to get involved with RAP, we need board members, we need phone people to give out the money, and if you're interested, please see me at the reception, and if you just want to give a check, we'd love that as well. Thank you very much.
Raise your hand if you were born after Roe v. Wade. I'm just curious. Okay, yeah, we're doing well. Okay, We've got a great diverse audience tonight. Okay, everyone, take a quick stretch. We're about to start our stories. That's right, this way, that way. Yeah, wiggle your butt a little bit. Okay, awesome. Okay, now have a seat again. Have a seat. All right. Tonight we are sharing original stories from women in California and across the nation that show us what it means to survive without access to reproductive health services. Though we have seen many aspects of reproductive health and justice under siege, from sterilization abuse to criminalizing pregnant women, the threats against contraceptive coverage, abortion remains a lightning rod in the national debate. So I want you to know this was a collaborative process to find these stories. Our partner organizations dug through emails, archives, and files. They come from a story competition, from collections of handwritten letters, and from news articles discovered by our organizers. There is a worldwide movement taking place to normalize the abortion experience. And by normalizing, we mean making it something we can all talk about without fear or shame. These stories are powerful, raw, and often surprisingly simple, vulnerable portraits of women caught in the crosshairs of the battle over abortion. Storytelling is one of the most powerful means of invoking change, and that's why tonight, joining us are an amazing group of celebrity guests reading these stories from the Frontline, bringing them alive, and I will now introduce them into the room. Please give them a round of applause. Scott Caldwell is a Tony Award-winning actress whose Broadway credits include August Wilson's Joe Turner's Come and Gone and Neil Simon's Proposals. On TV, she has had many starring and reoccurring and regular roles on shows from Lost to ER to Judging Amy. She's been in films from The Fugitive to Waiting to Exhale, and she'll be in the soon-to-be-released The Perfect Guy and Concussion. She currently serves as the national chair of SAG-AFTRA's Women's Committee and the Healthcare Safety Committee.
Good evening, and I'd just like to say that I did one of my very first performances in Los Angeles in this room. Eve Ensler's Ladies' Day. Yeah, so the National Center for Jewish Women have been relevant for a long time. When Roe v. Wade was decided in 1973, most states either severely restricted or banned abortion. The feminist movements of the 1960s challenged these restrictions. And in 1970, two recent graduates of the University of Texas Law School brought a lawsuit on behalf of a pregnant woman. Dallas area resident Norma L. McCorvey, Jane Roe, claiming a Texas law criminalizing most abortions violated her constitutional rights. Our first story this evening is adapted from a piece featured in the Abortion Diary podcast, and it takes us back 7 years before the Roe v. Wade decision to the 1960s, right here in Los Angeles. My first abortion was in 1966. I was 19 years old. I had just come out to California. I was supporting myself. I had dropped out of college and was living in West Los Angeles and working. I had sex with somebody and I got pregnant. I was, I think, scared, and it took me a while to really register that I was probably pregnant. When my period was late, I mostly thought, well, it's just late, it'll come. I don't even remember when I finally did get a test, but I did. I was relatively new to Los Angeles, so I wasn't sure where to turn in terms of getting help. Abortion at the time was illegal. I'd been at the University of Wisconsin, and friends of mine there who had become pregnant were faced with either going to Chicago to have an abortion, and at that point, by the mafia. Or if you had money, you could fly to Puerto Rico. I didn't know what the situation was in California, but a friend of mine, her mother did know, so she arranged for me to see a doctor who in turn could give a recommendation and could connect me with another doctor. I went to this doctor, and I remember being told that you need to at least give him a story about why you don't want to have this child. I was terrified of having a child. I had enough problems by myself, let alone caring for another human being, and I really felt a responsibility, as I thought then, when I have children, to really be someone who could be a good parent. I would not have been that. So I was very clear, but I remember that I had to elaborate on why this would be damaging and so forth. In any case, out of that, I got a name. The arrangement was made that I was to meet somebody at a bus stop on Sunset Boulevard, which was kind of frightening. I mean, a bus stop on Sunset Boulevard, and then you get into somebody else's car and you drive to wherever this would be taking place. But my overriding fear was of having a child. So this friend's mother dropped me off at the bus stop, and I sat there, and luckily, because I was a little scared, it was considered dangerous to hitchhike. Up comes this little Volkswagen Bug with this woman in it who was very nice. It turned out she ran a store that I knew, so we had a nice discussion, which was also in part to distract me as we drove up Coldwater Canyon. We parked before the house so that I wouldn't really remember where it was, which makes sense. We went inside, and then this man arrived who was the doctor. I told him how far along I was. 4 months. This had dragged on long enough. They were going to give me, I think, laughing gas, but I don't know exactly what it was. And I said, the only thing is that I have had epilepsy, and I'm not sure whether it would trigger something. So it was mutually agreed that there wouldn't be any anesthetic, and there was nothing else. I was terrified, which was the overriding feeling here. And so I said, oh, okay, and really saw it as okay, you know, grit your teeth. If you've seen war movies, I had this active imagination. I remember getting laid on a table, but I don't remember anything about the table, really. I stared at the ceiling, and it hurt like hell. I stayed totally still because I was really conscious of not messing it up. The one thing I do remember, though, it was put in a bucket. It was put in a bucket and I wanted to see it, and they wouldn't let me. And I don't know, I can understand why they didn't want me to, but in part, I don't know, I think I would have liked to have seen it. It might have been damaging to me, I don't know, but whatever it was, I felt it. And throughout all of this, I was mostly scared. And then I think they gave me some pills that were basically to fight infection, and the doctor said, "I'll call you." And the woman drove me back to the bus stop, and my friends finally took me home, and I remember I felt relieved.
A native of Detroit, Damon Gupton graduated from the Drama Division of the Juilliard School and the University of Michigan School of Music. Roles have included The Divide, The Newsroom, Suits, Rape, Prime Suspect. You may have seen him in Whiplash recently. And the Broadway production of Bruce Norris's Pulitzer and Tony Award-winning Clybourne Park. He is also an accomplished orchestra conductor, so you do it all, and who has made guest appearances with over 30 orchestras nationally and abroad. Damon Gupton.
Thank you very much. Thank you kindly. In 2013, NARAL Pro-Choice America sent out a call for stories to young people who are passionate about freedom of choice in their Choice Out Loud writing competition. They received over 300 submissions, and story number 167 is written from the perspective of a 23-year-old woman reflecting on the life of her great-grandmother. How close are we now to re-experiencing her great-grandmother's past, she wonders. Family narratives are a valuable means of sharing the abortion experience, and when mothers and grandmothers share their most personal stories with their loved ones, they drive away the shame, and they help us to realize that the need for accessible abortion care is an issue that touches each of us. This is the story. Growing up, I always had to beg my mother to talk about my great abuelita's past. I loved hearing about the history and the experiences that she lived through. And when I got to a certain age, my great abuelita began telling me stories that involved things she had to go through because she couldn't afford to do things differently. Mainly, having an abortion. My great abuelita had experienced singing opera, and she mingled with socialites in Mexico during the 1930s. But when she moved to America, she had to scrounge on her own, and she built her own little family from the ground up. My great abuelita held down 3 children and a husband, all while trying to make ends meet as a minority woman living in America for the very first time. Upon needing her first abortion, my great abuelita knew she didn't have the money to part with, but she also couldn't afford another mouth to feed. So she ended up finding an older woman to assist her in terminating her pregnancy. But it wasn't at a doctor's office that she had it done. It was in an alley. The older woman had a bottle of Clorox and a metal coat hanger. My great abuelita was sent home without any aftercare instructions or medicine. Birth control was not readily available or affordable to her at the time, and she had to terminate another pregnancy the same horrific, unsanitary way. Hearing my great abuelita's story at a young age made me glad that I didn't grow up during that period of feminist history. But now, at 23, it seems that we are only a few steps away from regressing women's health care. Even though my great abuelita's story is on the extreme end of what happens when women do not have access to birth control and complete health services, I feel that it impacted me in a way and changed my life. I knew at a young age that I would always stand up for what is right in this world, even when everyone else around me is turning a blind eye. And one day when I have my own children, I will pass on my great Abuelita story to them in hopes of planting seeds of justice and fairness. And I know these seeds will blossom, allowing my children to be crusaders for health care and for women everywhere.
Now we're going to come back to the present. Elizabeth Triplett is an actress and writer living in Los Angeles. She's created a name for herself in the new media world by co-producing, writing, and acting in Hulu's first original scripted series, Battleground, and is currently starring alongside her husband, Justin Abarca, I believe, as the weird couple in BuzzFeed's viral hit video, Elizabeth Triplett.
First, I'd just like to say that I worked for NCJWLA only 4 short years ago, and I'm honored to be back here again for this. Thank you for having me. Story number 237 from NARAL Pro-Choice America's Choice Out Loud writing competition is about seeking emergency contraception. For Justin, only emergency contraception became available over the counter for all ages beginning in 2013. However, generic copies, as well as older 2-pill versions that include the same active ingredient, remain restricted by age, with prescriptions required for those under 17. The kiss broke off long enough for the shirt to slide over her head and shoulders before their lips came together again. She gasped as his hands slid down her bare skin to unbutton her jeans, and her own fingers, inexperienced and shaking, fumbled with his belt. She felt him smile against her lips, amused by her innocence, as he reached down to help her. It wasn't long before they were naked in each other's arms. "Are you sure you want to do this?" he whispered. "We can stop if you're not ready." She looked up into the clear green eyes of the only man she'd ever felt truly comfortable with. "I want to be yours," she whispered back. He wrapped his arms around her and kissed her again. An hour later, when she felt him pull out of her aching body, she heard him curse. "What's wrong?" she asked, sitting up, but she saw before he answered. The condom, covered in her blood, had shredded. "It's okay." She fought to keep her voice from shaking. "I'll go to the pharmacy in the morning. It'll be fine." He nodded solemnly before picking her up and carrying her to the bathtub. She winced when the hot water washed between her legs. "I'm sorry," he apologized, sliding his fingers down her face. "I'm not." She smiled back at him and stretched to press her lips against his. As his arms wrapped around her waist, her worries drifted away. The next morning, she stood in line at the pharmacy, shifting her weight from foot to foot. When she finally made it to the counter, her face flushed red with shame as the pharmacist looked down at her critically. Plan B, please?" she muttered. The pharmacist shook his head as though he couldn't hear her, and she had to repeat herself 3 times, growing redder with every passing second. Finally, a look of comprehension passed over the man's face. "We don't sell that here, only generics." Reaching behind the counter, he placed a box in front of her. "And I'll need to see your ID." With a shaking hand, she passed over her driver's license to be scrutinized. "I can't sell this to you," he told her flatly as he passed back the license. "You're only 16, and you have to be 17 to buy generics." She felt as though all the air had been driven from her lungs. "What do I do?" Her voice shook and broke. The pharmacist reached behind the counter again and handed her a box. First response pregnancy test. Wait and hope. 2 weeks later, locked in her bathroom, tears began rolling down her cheeks as the second line appeared clearly. What do I do? She whispered to the empty bathroom. What do I do?
Michael Corey Davis is an actor, award-winning filmmaker, and humanitarian. For over 10 years, he's dedicated his time and talents to help eradicate human trafficking through his nonprofit organization, Artists United for Social Justice. As an actor, he's recently appeared in episodes of Anger Management, The McCarthys, and The Mentalist. Give a round of applause for Michael Corey Davis.
About 21% of all pregnancies in the United States, excluding miscarriages, end in abortion. Nearly all of these abortions are provided by freestanding clinics. Story number 182 from NARAL, Pro-Choice America's Choice Out Loud writing competition, brings us close to the everyday frustrations of one of America's most important and most controversial jobs, working at a clinic that provides abortion care. Becoming a clinic escort was one of the better things I've ever done with my life.
I did that.
But I came by the decision pretty nonchalantly. I just wanted to feel like I was physically making a difference. And I wanted to see what happened outside the clinics with my own eyes. So I could tell people, this is real. I was there. But there's one story I don't really tell, because I don't want to say I was there. In this instance, I feel like I failed. It started off badly because we didn't notice her immediately. She parked across the street instead of behind the clinic, putting her outside of the ring of protesters. We hurried over once we saw that she was approaching the clinic. The Catholics, they weren't an issue. They just continued praying the rosary at their framed picture of the Holy Mother. The more vocal protesters, however, they were already converging on the young woman and the man that was with her, telling her this was a place of evil, asking her, did she really want to kill her baby? One older woman shoved a little plastic infant in the young woman's face. See, honey, this is what your baby looks like. The young woman put her face in her hands and cried. We finally got the young woman to the clinic entrance, where we could bring a counselor out for her. We told her that she didn't have to go in, that we were just bringing someone out to talk to her. She just cried and shook her head. The man with her was just a friend who offered to drive. He wasn't American and was confused about what was going on. He smiled nervously, gesturing around at the giant poster of the aborted fetuses. The old man taking photos of everyone entering the clinic and asked, what is all of this? What is this for? By the time a counselor was available, the young woman had gone back to her car. We tried to persuade her to stay with us, to keep her away from the protesters, but she didn't want to be near the clinic. By the time she got to the car, she was surrounded by protesters trying to give her flyers, offering help, denouncing us as evil. They wouldn't let her get in the car. We went over to try to tell them to leave her alone, and one of them shoved another escort. We backed off after that. The protesters would take any excuse to bring a lawsuit against us, and our presence was only causing the situation to escalate, further frightening the young woman. She sat in the car with her driver for a while, the counselor standing outside with us in case she came back. But she didn't. She and her driver sat in the car for a while, and then they left. She didn't come back that day. I don't know if she ever came back.
We have David Gupton joining us on stage for one more piece. Dan?
Earlier this evening, you heard from Joyce Shore, the founder of the Women's Reproductive Rights Assistance Project, or RAP. Let's give her one big Gloria Steinem has said that RAP is often the one link between women and a choice that would otherwise remain only on paper. And that is key for so many women. Abortion has indeed become a right that is merely on paper. A person's various identities such as socioeconomic status, ethnicity, immigration status, education level, and whatever disability they may have, all impact to what extent abortion access translates from paper to reality. And RAP asked women who needed to terminate pregnancies to write down and share their experiences, and you saw some of those hundreds of letters that they've collected on display when you arrived. This is one of them. I'm a 35-year-old mother of 4 girls. I found out I was pregnant while I was on vacation and was so excited. My husband and I were thrilled at the thought of another baby. When I went to my ultrasound, they referred me to a level 2 sonogram. I knew there was something wrong. I had that feeling. The doctor came in and told me that my baby girl had Dandy Walker malformation, and it was severe. Next, I had to wait for an MRI to be done. And then they told me not only was the baby missing the dermis, but the kidneys were formed wrong. When we mentioned abortion, the group of specialists acted like I was saying a curse word and told me that my insurance wouldn't cover it and that I would have to leave state. And I feel like the doctors purposely pushed my appointments back so that I couldn't end my pregnancy in our state, and it would have been so expensive I couldn't have afforded it. This has been the hardest thing we've ever done. I wouldn't have been able to have this procedure without the charitable funds I received. And I can live with myself knowing my baby would only have known pain and suffering.
A Texan, Roe claimed that while her life was not endangered, as required at the time by Texas law, she couldn't afford to travel out of state and had a right to terminate her pregnancy in a safe medical environment. Despite the Supreme Court's 1973 decision, this issue has remained and is becoming an even greater challenge every day. Lindsay Scheibel is the 21-year-old founder and president of the organization Fund Texas Choice, a nonprofit based in Austin, Texas. Fund Texas Choice helps pay for abortion travel-related expenses. Lindsay founded it in response to the passage of Texas House Bill 2, a restricted bill on abortion services, which has especially negative impacts on the lives of low-income and rural Texans. Today, there are just 20 clinics in all of Texas that provide abortions. If House Bill 2's surgical center requirement is upheld, that'll go down to 8. Lindsay felt that sharing her story, both on and off stage, is important enough to come all the way out from Austin and join us. And she wrote her own narrative just for this event. We are thrilled to have her with us tonight, Lindsay Scheibel.
I'm so glad that y'all are here. This is my first time in California. I'm a bad Mexican. Mexicans are supposed to speak Spanish, but all I ever learned were the names of meals. Enchiladas, tamales, fideo. And the word for shut up. I had to learn the rest in college. My mom should have taught me, but she had been trained out of her Spanish by the teachers who used to hit her. She was held back in 2nd grade because she couldn't recite the Pledge of Allegiance. When she moved to Houston, she changed her name and started hanging out with a lot of white people. Why would she hold her kids back by teaching them a language everyone hated? So when someone calls my organization's Spanish hotline, I have a small panic attack. It's not because I don't know how to help them. I've helped dozens of people who have to travel out of town, sometimes out of the state completely, in order to get a legal abortion. That's my job. But this lady is Cuban, and Cubans don't pronounce their S's. I'll have to make her repeat herself 1,000,000 times, and she's already in a stressful situation. I call my mom. My mom finds out that this lady is too far along for any clinic in Texas to help her. She has to get to Albuquerque, New Mexico, but to drive there from Houston would take 13 hours, and that's if you don't stop for gas. And anyway, she doesn't have a car. But she can't fly either. When she entered this country, the Department of Homeland Security gave her a temporary pass, valid until 2016, written on a half sheet of white paper. It looks like she printed it off the internet. Trying to go through airport security with a cheap note and a Cuban passport means sitting in a holding area for God knows how long while the TSA tries to figure out your status. So she wants a Greyhound bus. The first leg of her journey is 12 hours and stops in Oklahoma City. I could have taken her through El Paso, but the border checkpoints there are terrible. And after a night's rest, she boards the bus again, and 10 hours after that, gets to Albuquerque. I tell my mom to communicate how sorry I am that this lady's trip is going to suck so much. And my mom says she doesn't care. She's just glad to be able to get there in the first place. I wait anxiously for the day she's scheduled to leave town. I'm used to these kinds of trips going terribly wrong. At Fun Texas Choice, my job is to make travel arrangements for poor Texans who can't get to their closest abortion clinic. But my clients don't have the resources to make up for my mistakes. So if my reservation gets misplaced in the hotel system, my clients don't have enough money to just buy a room themselves. They have to call me at 2 in the morning and hope I wake up, because if I don't, they'll be sleeping on the street in a strange city that I sent them to. I keep my ringer on all night. My mom calls me the morning of the first day. Are you sure you gave her the right confirmation number for her bus ticket? The lady at the counter won't let her in. I'm at the grocery store holding an infant. I tell my mom I'll call her right back. Put my kid in my husband's arms and check my email on my phone, and yes, the number was wrong. I write the new number on my arm and call my mom back within 3 minutes. Crisis averted. She didn't miss the bus. At 1 in the morning, my mom calls again. The hotel's not letting her in without a credit card. I call the hotel, try to sound professional in the middle of the night. They misplaced my form. I assured them it was there. They found it somewhere else on the desk. Back to sleep. The next day, my mom calls just to update me. She's on the bus to Albuquerque. And then nothing. For a week. I asked my mom if she got home safely. Well, yeah. That's all I get. I hang up with my mom, type in a little spreadsheet, got home fine, color the row green, and move on to the next person. Because after all, in Texas, there's always another one.
Our final reading of the evening, I just want to remind you that our amazing Maya Paley, Director of Legislative and Community Engagement, is going to have a special letter to share with you in here in this room right after the reading, a way to start taking action, and then we're going to call you in to a call to action reception with more dessert brought out and an opportunity to engage with each of our 13 organizations. They've all got an action for you, so we hope you'll stick around. Take an action, sign up for something before you head out. And now I want to introduce Amy Brenneman. She's an actress, producer, and activist. She's well known for her on-screen roles on television, Judging Amy, Private Practice, and The Leftovers. The Leftovers. As well as in films such as Heat, 9 Lives, and Words and Pictures. Her extensive theatrical career includes productions at Yale Rep, American Repertory Theater, much more, but as an activist, Amy is dedicated to feminist issues and has worked with Planned Parenthood and Feminist Majority. You go, Amy. Come on up.
I feel like Lindsay's like Harriet Tubman. I feel like I'm
sitting next to Harriet Tubman. Awesome. Really, no doubt. I also, I'm going to totally embarrass her, but do we have any Judging Amy fans here? Y'all know how it was based on my mom. She's the real judge. Yes. She's here right here. Flew out from Connecticut to this event. No, she didn't, but she is the original activist, and she has made me what I am. So, as the number of clinics, doctors' offices, and hospitals that perform abortions dwindle nationwide due to draconian laws, take Texas's surgical center requirement, more and more women are turning to ordering the abortion pill online in the early weeks of unwanted pregnancies. In the United States, strict protocols exist for administering these pills. Many states require much, much more than the minimum, with up to 4 doctor visits required in Texas. Thank God you're there. In 39 states, it's against the law to perform an abortion if you're not a doctor. In some of the remaining states, you are still required to be a medical professional. In New York, you can do your own abortion in the first 2 trimesters, but only if you're following a doctor's advice. About a quarter of states also still have old laws that make it a crime to help someone else with a self-induction. In a law passed in 1845, for example, Massachusetts calls for a sentence of up to 7 years for assisting. By ordering medicine online and self-administering abortions, many U.S. women are now criminals. What happens when they and their accomplices are caught? This story was adapted from the New York Times article, "A Mother in Jail for Helping Her Daughter Have an Abortion," by Emily Bazelon, a journalist who's been following this and other abortion-related stories closely. Today is September 12th, 2014, and I'm going to jail. I'm a mom. I have 3 kids. I live in a small town in Pennsylvania. I had a good job. I worked with the elderly at a local center, and I'm scared. One of my kids is 11. I'm here because I ordered pills online for my oldest daughter when she was 16. They're saying all sorts of things about me, that I performed an illegal abortion, that I'm a murderer. It's not true. My daughter was several weeks pregnant. I helped her. My daughter and I, we have a good relationship. When she came to me, I said I'd support her, whatever her decision. After she thought about it, she said, "I can't have a baby right now." And she asked me to help her look up clinics. We looked together. The closest was 75 miles away. By law, we'd have to go there, receive counseling, and wait 24 hours before coming back for the procedure. It would cost up to $600. You have to understand, I didn't have health insurance for my daughter, and I was afraid. I didn't want to tell my husband. I knew he'd be so upset, and I didn't have the money to take the time from work. Besides, my husband and I share a car. That's how we both get to work. I called the local women's center. They said they couldn't help. So my daughter and I kept searching the internet. That's when we read about the pills. Misoprostol and mifepristone for just $45. I hadn't heard about them before, but I read all the information. They said these pills would help give a miscarriage, that they were the same ones a doctor would give. I swear, I didn't know they were illegal. The pills came about 5 days after we ordered them, little white tablets. We read all the instructions again. We knew the right dosage. We knew what to look for if there were complications. My daughter started bleeding after she took the pills, like she was having her period. Then she started having stomach pains, and she got scared. So that was when I took her to the hospital. At first, she didn't want me to tell the hospital anything. I told her, we have to, so they can take care of you the way they need to. I didn't know we didn't have to say anything, that it was just like a miscarriage. The doctors looked her over. Thankfully, everything was okay. They sent us home and didn't say anything else about it. They didn't say that we'd be reported or that we were in trouble. My daughter was able to go back to school and everything seemed fine. But a few days later, in the morning, while my husband was still sleeping, some police officers came to our door. They said they had a search warrant, and they looked through everything until they found the box the pills came in. Someone at the hospital had reported me to State Child Protective Services, like I'd done something to hurt my daughter. They asked me whether I bought the pills online. I said yes. I was surprised when they told me I had to have a doctor's script. I didn't know that.
I spent almost 2 years after that sick with worrying, wondering if they'd come back, if I'd get in trouble. It wasn't something you can block out. It was on my mind in everyday activities. And last December, it all came down. I was charged with a felony for offering medical consultation about abortion without a medical license, and with 3 misdemeanors for endangering the welfare of a child, dispensing drugs without being a pharmacist, and assault. The DA and the judge said this case wasn't about being pro-life or pro-choice, that this was about the unauthorized practice of medicine and pharmacy. But the judge could have given me probation. Instead, he chose to send me to jail. The hospital could have educated me. Instead, they chose to report suspected child abuse, and the DA chose to prosecute me. I'm worried about my family. I'll be here up to 18 months. The judge chose to send me here. What choice did I have?
Thank you, Amy. One more round of applause for our reader. This evening. To start us off right here in the auditorium, Maya Paley, NCJW LA's fearless and utterly fantastic Director of Legislative and Community Engagement. She has a letter for us.
Hi everyone. First of all, I want to thank all of our story readers, because that was really, I'm shaking right now. And I want to thank all of you for being here. I just made a split decision to tell you a really, really short story, because one of the things that bothers me the most is how shamed women are for getting abortions, for getting emergency contraception, for using regular contraception. And for me, that's what I find to be the most horrific thing about this entire thing. So I've never told this story before. I'm going to tell it very briefly. It's my story. Even my mom hasn't heard this, and she's in the room. I lived for about a year and a half in Israel, and I was on a fellowship, and I made $15,000 for that entire year. And I made it a point to not ask for help from my parents. And I was 28 years old, and I got pregnant. And just, I'll put it out there, I have done regular birth control. I had already done Plan B twice. And it doesn't mean that I'm stupid or careless. It means that I'm a normal human being. So I'm going to say that first. I saw an abortion in Israel, and it's not my first language, it's my second language, but it was very hard for me to try to seek help. I went to the doctor multiple times, only to find out that it wasn't covered in my insurance there. And it's the same thing that happens to people here all the time. And so I immediately booked a flight back to California. And I didn't tell anybody why I was leaving. I didn't tell that many people that that was what was going on. And then actually I ended up having a miscarriage. I wasn't ready to have a child. As I told you, I was barely making any money. I was like a human rights researcher trying to figure out my life. And I came back here, and I was fine. And, you know, I started working here, so it's all good. So, this is an international issue. And this is an issue that we all need to be thinking about. And the reason we're all here tonight is because we want to end this shame. This shaming of women, of not letting women. I want to get to a point where I can stand here and say, raise your hand if you had an abortion, and it's okay for people to raise their hands. Raise your hand if you use Plan B, and it's okay. And nobody's going to feel uncomfortable saying that. That's where I want to get to. So, all right, I know we're very short on time. The call to action, what we want you to be signing, I meant to bring it up, is that one sheet. There's a letter on your chair, and it's about the Hyde Amendment. It was mentioned briefly tonight. What the Hyde Amendment does, it's been enacted since 1976, and it's not a law. It's like a provision, a rider bill that's put into our budget. And every single year, Our Congress adds this into the budget and votes on it, and what it is it excludes our Medicaid recipients from coverage for abortion, except in cases of rape, incest, or when the woman's life is in danger. This is unacceptable. On top of this ban, we have other bans that exclude Native Americans who receive the Indian Health Service, Peace Corps volunteers, military personnel, thank you, federal employees. So this is something that we don't even have the ability to vote on as voters, and it's being put into the budget process every single year, and our president has the ability to take it out of that process. I don't know why it hasn't happened until now. I really don't understand it. But this is something that we need to press President Obama to do. He just spoke about how he's going to stand up for reproductive rights and health care for women just this week, and we need to hold him to that. It's a classist, racist, and sexist provision, and that's something that we all know and we need to think about. Why are we excluding poor women in this country from this right? Let's see what else I wanted to say. I wrote this whole thing and I didn't even use it, but anyway, you get my point. So what I want to see is every single one of you signing this letter and handing it to someone in the back who's going to raise their hand. I don't know who.
Actually, just bring it right to the check-in table that you came, and I want you to sign it before you leave, and put it right on the check-in table. We're going to stack it up right there.
And we are sending this to President Obama next week, because the budget process is happening very soon. So I need all of you to sign the letter, put it out there, and make this happen. And if you have anyone else who you want to send this letter to, see me and we'll send it to them. Thank you very much.
Everybody give me 1 second. Please stand up if you're on a street team. If you're on a street team tonight, stand up. Ready? Okay. Our street team members come from our 12 partnering organizations in NCGW. Before you leave tonight, have some dessert, have some wine, and raise your hand, street team members. I want you to talk to one of our street team members and find out about an action that you can take, because we're not going to change this without each of us agreeing step by step to take an action. All right? Thank you, everybody, so much for joining us tonight.